Why does America, once the world's richest and most powerful nation, now feel more and more like a struggling third world country in 2025? This is not just about politics. It's about everyday life, crumbling roads, unaffordable healthcare, soaring crime in cities, a mental health crisis, tent cities popping up near tech headquarters, and families working 2 jobs just to afford groceries. If you've looked around lately and thought, something's not right, you're not alone, and in this video, we're going to unpack exactly how the United States, in many ways, is slipping into the conditions once associated with developing countries. If you care about where America is heading and what can be done to stop the fall, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's have this real conversation. And quick disclaimer before we get into this topic, this video is not meant to disrespect the hardworking people of developing nations or the American people themselves. It's an honest breakdown of measurable trends, economic shifts, and social conditions based on real-world data, news reports, and expert analysis. Now let's get into it. First, let's talk about infrastructure. In a country that put a man on the moon, you'd expect roads, bridges, airports, and trains to be world-class. But the truth is, many are falling apart. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the U.S. infrastructure grade in recent years was a C-. Some bridges are over 100 years old. Water systems are leaking millions of gallons daily. In cities like Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint, Michigan, people literally don't have clean drinking water. These aren't isolated cases. They're signs of a systemic problem. Compare this to places like China, which has built thousands of miles of high-speed rail in just the last decade. America can't even finish a bullet train in California after 15 years of planning. Now, let's move to homelessness. The richest country in the world has over 600,000 homeless people, and that number is probably undercounted. In cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle, entire sidewalks have been taken over by tents. We're not talking about a few rough sleepers. We're talking about full-blown humanitarian crises in cities that have multi-billion-dollar economies. How is it possible that people working full-time jobs are sleeping in cars or under bridges? The housing crisis is part of it. The median home price in the U.S. has skyrocketed to over $400,000, while wages haven't kept up. Renting a 1-bedroom apartment in many urban areas now eats up 50% or more of a person's paycheck. That's not sustainable. When people can't afford housing, that's not just an economic issue, that's a social collapse. Now, let's dig into healthcare. America spends more on healthcare than any other country on Earth, over $4 trillion per year, and yet millions still don't have insurance. And even those who do often avoid seeing a doctor because of high deductibles. People die from preventable illnesses. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy. Compare this with countries that have universal healthcare, where people don't have to think twice before going to the hospital. In 2025, America is the only major developed country where a GoFundMe page is a standard method of paying for cancer treatment. Let that sink in. And then there's education. American public schools are, honestly, deeply unequal. If you're lucky enough to live in a wealthy zip code, your kid might get a decent education. But if you live in a poor neighborhood, chances are your school is underfunded, overcrowded, and, well, under-resourced. Teachers are quitting in droves, and school shootings are now regular enough that students do active shooter drills before they can even do multiplication. Meanwhile, student debt has passed $1.7 trillion. A college degree, which was once the ticket to the middle class, now often feels like a financial trap. And speaking of the middle class, where did it go? Over the past 40 years, income inequality in the United States has exploded. CEOs now make 400 times what the average worker earns. Meanwhile, real wages for most people have barely moved. The pandemic only made it worse. Billionaires got richer while millions were laid off or forced into gig work. More people are living paycheck to paycheck than ever before, and food insecurity is affecting entire families. When people can't afford eggs or baby formula in the richest country on Earth, something is honestly deeply wrong. Next, let's talk about crime and safety. In some urban areas, crime has returned to levels not seen since the early 90s. Carjackings, smash and grabs, retail theft, random assaults. These aren't just headlines. They're real concerns for everyday Americans. Police departments are underfunded or understaffed, and trust between communities and law enforcement is broken. In some cities, people don't even bother calling 911 because they know no one will come. That's not just dysfunction, that's a collapse in basic services. Now let's zoom out. What defines a third world country, or, more accurately, a developing nation, in 2025? Weak infrastructure, high poverty rates, political instability, inequality, unreliable public services, and a declining quality of life. Sound familiar? You might argue, well, America still has a massive GDP, world-class universities, and Silicon Valley. And that's true, but honestly, those benefits are increasingly out of reach for average people. What we're seeing is a two-tier society, one America that has private jets, private schools, and gated communities, and another America that's just trying to survive. When half the country is living a completely different reality from the other half, that's not just inequality, that's national fragmentation. Let's not forget about the political system. Congress is gridlocked. Basic functions like passing a budget or raising the debt ceiling become national emergencies. Billionaires and corporations have more influence on policy than voters do. Misinformation spreads faster than facts. The country feels more divided than at any time since the Civil War. And the result? Americans are losing faith in democracy itself. According to surveys, a growing number of young people don't believe democracy is the best form of government anymore. That's not just a crisis of governance. That's a crisis of identity. Now add climate change into the mix. Wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, and heat waves are battering states like California, Florida, and Texas. Infrastructure isn't built for it. Power grids fail. Emergency systems buckle. Insurance companies are pulling out of entire regions because it's just too risky. What happens when Americans can't get insurance for their homes or businesses? That's a step backward into instability. And then there's the mental health crisis. Depression, anxiety, suicide, all at record highs, especially among teens. Why? Because they're growing up in a country that feels like it's breaking apart. Social media, economic pressure, lack of access to care, and broken families all contribute. But the core issue is this. People feel like they have no future. In many ways, the American dream is becoming a myth. You can work hard, get a degree, stay out of trouble, and still end up poor, sick, and ignored. That's not a dream, that's a trap. And the final red flag: emigration. More Americans are now considering leaving the United States to live abroad than ever before. They're looking at Canada, Portugal, Mexico, Thailand, not just for retirement, but to live. Think about that. People used to risk their lives to come to America. Now Americans are thinking about leaving because they feel like their own country doesn't work anymore. This doesn't mean America is doomed. But it does mean that without serious changes, the United States risks becoming what people used to call a banana republic, a place run by elites, plagued by corruption, where the majority are poor, services are broken, and institutions can't be trusted. So is America becoming a third world country? Not by the old textbook definitions, but in the ways that matter to everyday people. Infrastructure, safety, cost of living, healthcare, education, opportunity, and trust in government. The United States is moving in that direction. The good news? Nothing about this decline is inevitable. America has the resources, talent, and history of reinvention to turn things around. But first, we have to admit there's a problem. The sooner we drop the illusion of being the best and start fixing what's broken, the better chance we have to recover. Because no empire falls in one day. It falls slowly, then all at once. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, share it. Let's get people talking about this. Not just complaining, but demanding better. Subscribe if you want more real talk like this. America deserves better, and so do you.